All right. Today we're talking about transitions, specifically when we are making tracks. And I'm going to use an example in Ableton, but this applies to any DAW that you're using. And the principles apply to many different genres as well. It's the same principles about building tension and then releasing and having this flow. So broadly speaking, a musical transition is an event used to segue between two different sections of a track. Sometimes two song sections will easily go together in a very natural way, but other times you might find that the transition is unexciting or a bit jarring. And so here we're going to look at a few different ways to add excitement to your transitions where it's needed and how to make them flow smoothly. And I'll share some examples from works that I'm currently making and show you my screen. And these are just suggestions to get you inspired. It's not the whole definitive way of ways you can make transitions, but see what works for you, try them out, and always stay creative. And sometimes effective transitions in some contexts are different in others. So it just comes down to experimentation. So one first thing to think about is this high gloss. If you're making an electronic track of any sort, even a pop song, but if you're writing it in a DAW, think about sound effects, cymbals, rises, glissandos, shimmers, non-musical elements. So they gloss over what might be a fairly unremarkable change in an arrangement, and they add a sense of forward motion and progression by essentially resetting the listener's ear. So thin, bright, evolving sounds work best for this purpose, hence the popularity of a white noise sweep. And let me show you an example here. I'm going to share my screen on this. This is a track. It's not yet done. It's in progress. But we have this here. If we listen to this hook build going into a pre-chorus, and I'm going to scroll down so you can see these noises that I have swishing up. Oh, here's one transition first. We'll get into this in a second. I think the CPU usage is bringing out with all of the zoom and everything on as well. Oh my gosh, it's slowing down so much with the CPU. I don't think my computer right now is handling Zoom and the software. You can see here the CPU usage is going crazy through the roof. So in order to show this, I would have to print the track. I think I can show you a recording of it. If we can listen to this. But the point is, while this is getting pulled up, the point is to have these high gloss sounds that are popping up throughout a song. And then from there, we can then segue into other songs. So let me pull that up to show you. The other things that we can think about, okay, if you can hear this, this will be easier to hear. I'm going to skip to the sweep. Here we go. voice that's going up and builds. So you hear those builds coming up, and it's like shh, shh. So those are some ways that you can do transitions. Another thing that you can do with transitions are adding silent gaps. So think about cutting away and creating silence, and this grabs attention, and it also works as a reset for the listener. So try cutting out all track elements at the very end of a 16 bar section before slamming back in with a new section, or subvert the tried and true tested by adding the gap at the start of a section instead of the end. It's kind of like this ghost beat. That trick works particularly well in combination with other transitions. Like if you have that silence, you have this wash of high pitched sounds and then nothing, and then into your song. So here's another example using the same song about using gaps. Let me I'll share my screen here so you can see what it looks like. Might have to play it. With here you can see I have these samples pulled in and manipulated here between a hook and then a pre-chorus. These here, if you press 0, that's activating or deactivating sample. But you can cut out a bar of space before a transition and then add reverb and delay and other effects. What that sounds like there would be like this. So we're building up. So another idea that you can do for your transitions is you can play with the spacing and timing of your gaps. So for example, you can begin the silence at a different point within the riff or chord sequence, and it might give a different musical effect that's more effective. A better chord transition, for example. If it's suitable for the genre, you might also try a silent gap that plays with timing. So stay quiet for an unexpected extra beat. Another thing that you can do, is let it hang. So instead of reducing the entire track to silence at the end of a phrase, you can try to remove all elements except for one particular key sound. And then the trick is used often in hip hop, for example, to grab the listener's attention and then allow a key vocal phrase to stand alone for a beat or two, giving them even more impact when the other parts slam back in again. So this is, for example, let's say that you have synths and bass and drums and vocals going at the same time. You might cut out everything except for the vocals and have those repeat. And then you bring in more. Letting that hang gives like a harder effect. You could also, instead of taking elements away at the end of a phrase, you could also use different chords, transpositions, or a short musical turnaround to bridge the gap. This could replace the last few notes or bar of your phrase, or even be inserted as an extra bar if you want to be creative and try out new ideas. And if your main hook is taken from a long sample, you could try using a so far unused section of the sample as a special fill sample. So here's an example from that same track that I was playing earlier, where I was adding some electronic toms, high, mids, and lows, building them up, sweeping, and then having a little bit of silence where only a few of the drums stayed in, and then it slammed into the downbeat. So I'll just play it from a few seconds in. And if I turn up the volume here, it's going to hit harder. So just listen one more time. Into your body, do it all, just be about it. Get a little love into your body, do it all, just be about it. So you do these sweeps and like reverse cymbals, have those building up, cut other drum sounds out, and then drop it. So you could also do shock tactics. So you could either use these on their own or with other ideas mentioned earlier. A very popular turnaround trick involves the use of a rhythmic event, either a drum fill or a drum roll, and it builds up. And this sudden burst of intensity heavily suggests that a change is coming, but also be aware that using too many fills all the time can lessen their impact. So use them sparingly and effectively. So a good thing that you could try would be, for example, going to Splice and getting a riser and combining that with a noise and then doing a filter sweep through automation and opening up that fill right before a transition, and then about a bar ahead, cut the sound out and either have echo with feedback delay lingering on, maybe some reverb, so it's just hanging in the air, and then you drop the beats. The other things that you can do is work your core hook. And this also works if you have a lead line, a vocal, any sort of instrumental hook. These can be turned into powerful tools for introducing different sections of the track. So for example, if you solo the first word or line of the vocal when it enters, you can get a little clip and use that as your turnaround. So you could have the vocal come in earlier than the main chorus section to hint at it or lead into it using chops or stutters, or reverse the reverb on it, which is a really popular tip as well. So I hope this was helpful and gave you some ideas, and let me know what worked for you.